When we first entered Snezhnaya, we encountered a strange sentient device called the Eye of Graeae with a mission to reach tomorrow. It sought to recover its missing body and its memories. And our quest in doing so ultimately revealed the origins of the Belyi Tsar, the Shadow Realm, and the truth behind the fate system and the primordial human. So let's go back to the very beginning, Hyperborea. During a time of conflict between the Hyperboreans and the heavens, the Voyager, whose true name was Anakarsis, cast her mind into the body of a Hyperborean youth. He became a saint to Hyperborea, speaking truths from beyond the world and inspiring a rebellion against the heavens. But the Voyager also discovered something about the system of fate. In a world where every being's fate is predetermined, every fate that becomes anchored causes the abyss to anchor itself at the end of time. As Alice described it, the abyss is essentially the hatred of the fates that never come to pass. The more fates that are cemented into place, the angrier the abyss becomes. In other words, the Heavenly Principle's fate system isn't preventing destruction, it might actually guarantee it at the hands of the abyss at the end of time. Which is why having time move in loops and cycles might be the way to prevent time from reaching that end. To buy the world more time, the Voyager created the Shadow Realm, a plane containing infinite realities that exists above the world and acts as a barrier between Tevat and the abyss. The Hyperboreans eventually learned this and sought out to overthrow the Heavenly Principles by creating their own god, the Primordial Human. They attempted to create it from the corpse of the Cryo-Dragon Sovereign, but the experiment spiraled out of control, transforming their once lush green land into a frozen wasteland. After the heavens finally noticed everything going on, they responded by dropping a divine nail and destroying Hyperborea. However, the experiment never truly failed. It was only incomplete. 1,000 years later, Monarch Snezhnaya emerged from the remains of the Cryo-Dragon. He eventually became the Tsar of Snezhnaya and its first Cryo-Archon. The Tsar began investigating his origins and discovered the records of the Saint of Hyperborea. At first, he believed the Saint was responsible for Hyperborea's destruction, unable to understand why she had created the Shadow Realm. Only after ripping it open for his expeditions into Hyperborea's ruins did he learn the truth that she had known. The Shadow Realm had been protecting the world from the abyss. By opening it, he allowed the abyss to slowly seep into Tevat, bringing the world closer to its inevitable end. He also discovered that he himself was meant to become the primordial human, but was incomplete. Believing that becoming the primordial human and ascending to the highest throne of the heavens was the only way to prevent the coming disaster, the Tsar created Welgamir to research how to complete the experiment. Among its researchers were Pavlina, Koshche, Alvis, and the court jester Aksinya. Aksinya had been raised by the Tsar after he discovered her as a child inside a time capsule in the ruins of Hyperborea. He shared his vision of the future with her, a world without hatred, envy, or desire, a world where humans and gods could no longer be differentiable, united by everlasting and unchanging love. But the Tsar died during the cataclysm before he could ever realize this vision. Within Welgamir, the Eye of Graeae was eventually created. Combined with the Tsar's body, it would supposedly complete the primordial human. However, the Eye of Graeae did not share Aksinya's vision of the new world, and so it convinced Pavlina, Alvis, and Koshche to betray her, and they cast Aksinya into the Shadow Realm, where she remained for centuries. They then split the Eye of Graeae amongst themselves. And centuries later, the traveler's quest to recover its missing pieces and Aksinya's return from the Shadow Realm was all a part of her plan to complete the primordial human, so she tried to fulfill the Tsar's final wish, but the traveler ultimately stopped her. What makes the primordial human particularly interesting is that the Hyperboreans were far from the only people who attempted to create one. We first encountered the concept through Albedo, who was created as a part of Rhinedottir's own primordial human experiment. It also appears in Renee's writings and the legend of Ajax. In the Temple of Space, Milanta and Astoria discussed the heretical myth that the primordial human was born of both light and darkness. When the light and darkness came together, they created the primordial human. Aksinya also revealed that the seed of the primordial human had remained vacant since the fall of Nibelung. Nibelung, the fallen master of the Light Realm, who ventured into deep space and encountered the abyss, may therefore have been the first primordial human. And so I think Rhinedottir is still experimenting with the creation of the primordial human. As a sinner capable of wielding the abyss, Rhinedottir also merged with Nabirius, the ruler of life, essentially possessing both aspects of light and dark. In the God's Limits teaser, she refers to her creations as part of an experiment. And if I had to guess, she may be trying to create beings born of both light and darkness, similar to the creation of the primordial human. This could also explain Asmoday's decision to separate the Traveler and their twin at the beginning of the game. When Nicole talks about Albedo, she says that in another reality, Albedo could have become the primordial human, traversing and creating worlds, but in this reality, the Traveler appears to occupy that role. The Traveler can wield every element and purify the abyss, strongly associating them with light. Meanwhile, their twin spent time in khaenri'ah and eventually became the leader of the Abyss Order, seemingly representing darkness. There's also a concept that repeatedly appears throughout the game, syzygy. While it has an astronomical meaning most of us are familiar with, in Gnosticism it refers to a pair of masculine and feminine divine forms of God, so perhaps the twins represent two halves of the primordial human. Nalanta explains that Asmoday separating the twins went beyond simple punishment and may have been connected to the myth that the primordial human was born of both light and dark. By separating them, Asmoday may have forced them onto separate journeys so that they can cover the truth of the world and eventually ascend to the throne meant for them. This could even explain Rhinedottir's experiments. In the god's limits, she states that her creations became unstable within the space she's experimenting in because of the ruler of space. Perhaps Asmoday made these spaces incompatible with life to prevent her experiments from producing something capable of interfering with the twins' path of ascension. But why must the primordial human contain both light and darkness? We may have already seen our answer in Natlan. In the quest involving Kukul Khan, he intended to use our little Tapetlasaur to activate a mechanism that would phlogistionize all of Natlan and create a new world composed entirely of light. But a world of only light would also mean the end of evolution. Everything would become identical. What meaning does light have in a world without darkness? The Tsar's vision of a perfect world was also one of a pure, unchanging love. A world without hatred, envy, desire, or even differences between gods and humans. Yet in the end, it would only be a world within a different shell. So perhaps salvation isn't about eliminating darkness and creating a world of pure light. It's about preserving the light in a world where darkness will always exist. And maybe that's what Asmoday wanted, to preserve the Traveler's light by having both twins go on their separate journeys. This might also explain why the Traveler is the only twin recognized as a descender. According to Skirk, the Abyss is the shadow of the world and will always exist, and a shadow can only exist where there is light. In a universe being consumed by darkness, it is the light that must struggle to survive. Thus, the Traveler representing light needs a will strong enough to rival the world itself. The twin, meanwhile, embodies the darkness. Unlike light, darkness does not need to fight for its existence. Wherever light exists, darkness will follow. And without darkness, light itself loses meaning. Perhaps this is precisely why the primordial human is believed to be born of both light and darkness. And upon reflecting on this quest, the Tsaritsa's situation seems to mirror that of the Tsar's very closely. Given that the Tsaritsa has her own gesture just like the Tsar did, seeks to take down the heavenly principles and create a new world, I wonder if collecting the Gnosis has something to do with creating their own primordial human. After all, with the exception of the Pyronosis, they have all the other ingredients. The power of light from the Gnosis, a vessel that can wield the power of the Abyss, and the willpower and remains of the third descender from stellar linchpins and the Gnosis. So let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments and consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.